My name is Lila Harper, and if you're reading this, it's probably because you've heard the rumors swirling around me like a storm cloud. Maybe you've heard I'm dramatic or that I overreacted to something small. Or maybe you've been told I'm unhinged, dangerous even. But let me tell you one thing, I am not who they say I am. Not anymore. I used to be just another face in the crowd at Vega Corp, a massive marketing firm with sleek glass walls and an even slicker reputation. It was the kind of place where everyone wore tailored suits, but no one really fit in. The air buzzed constantly with the hum of deadlines, whispered gossip, and the clatter of keyboards pounding out ideas for campaigns that would sell products people didn't need. And there I was, sitting quietly at my desk on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning, doing exactly what I'd always done, trying to stay invisible while keeping up appearances. You see, I wasn't ambitious. Not like some of my coworkers who practically clawed their way through meetings just to get noticed by upper management. No, I liked blending into the background. Being reliable without being flashy. Safe, predictable, forgettable, that was me. At least, that's how I thought of myself until everything changed. It all started with coffee. A simple, stupid cup of coffee. That morning, I had arrived early as usual, carrying 2 cups from the cafe downstairs. One for me, and one for our team lead, Marcus Hale. He was the kind of boss who expected his employees to cater to him, though he'd never admit it outright. Bringing him coffee every day was my unspoken duty, a peace offering disguised as professionalism. That morning, I balanced both cups carefully as I walked toward his office, navigating the maze of cubicles and avoiding eye contact with anyone who might try to stop me for idle chit-chat. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, doesn't it? As I turned the corner near Marcus's door, someone else rounded it at the same time. A junior intern named Chloe, fresh-faced and eager, clutching a stack of papers taller than she was. We collided before either of us could react, and in an instant, hot liquid splashed everywhere. My shoes were soaked, Chloe's papers scattered across the floor, and worst of all, Marcus's coffee, the caramel macchiato he demanded every single morning, was gone. For a split second, I froze, staring down at the mess. Then I looked up, only to find Marcus standing in his doorway, watching the whole scene unfold. His lips pressed into a thin line, and I knew immediately that this wasn't going to end well. "Lila," he said, sharply, stepping forward. "What the hell is going on?" Before I could explain, or apologize, which I already knew wouldn't matter, he grabbed my arm and yanked me closer. The next thing I felt was the sting of his hand across my cheek. The sound echoed down the hallway, loud enough to make heads turn. For a moment, everything went silent. Even Chloe stopped scrambling to pick up her papers and stared at us, wide-eyed. And then came the whispers. Oh my God, did you see that? She totally deserved it. Why is she making such a big deal out of nothing? By lunchtime, the story had spread like wildfire throughout the office. By the end of the day, it had morphed into something entirely different. According to the grapevine, I had tripped over my own feet and spilled the coffee deliberately, throwing a tantrum when Marcus called me out on it. Never mind that none of them had actually seen it happen. Never mind that they hadn't bothered to ask. They decided I was the villain, and once the narrative took hold, there was no changing their minds. At first, I tried to defend myself. I told anyone who would listen what really happened, hoping anyone would believe me. But instead of sympathy, I got condescending smiles and dismissive remarks. "You're blowing this way out of proportion," said Rachel from accounting, sipping her green tea like she was delivering wisdom from on high. It was just a slap. "Maybe if you weren't so clumsy, none of this would have happened," added Greg, one of Marcus's favorites, with a smug grin. Even Chloe, the poor girl whose papers I'd accidentally sent flying, avoided looking at me after that. She muttered something about how stressful things must be for me before scurrying off to her desk, leaving me alone with my shame. Alone, but not broken. Not yet. Because here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you time to think, to plan, to figure out exactly how far you're willing to go to take back control. The days that followed were brutal. Marcus acted like nothing had happened, treating me with the same casual disdain he always had. If anything, he seemed emboldened, snapping at me during meetings and assigning me menial tasks designed to remind me of my place. Meanwhile, my coworkers continued to treat me like I was radioactive. Conversations stopped whenever I entered a room. People found excuses to avoid working with me. And still, the whispers persisted. But beneath the surface, something inside me began to shift. The fear and humiliation I'd felt after the slap slowly gave way to anger. Cold, calculated anger that burned brighter with each passing day. I replayed the incident over and over in my mind, dissecting every detail, analyzing every reaction. What struck me most wasn't the slap itself, but the way everyone had rallied around Marcus, excusing his behavior while tearing mine apart. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of them. Their complicity, their cowardice, their refusal to stand up for what was right. So I made a decision. If no one else was going to hold them accountable, then I would do it myself. Step 1 was research. I spent hours poring over company policies, employee handbooks, and internal memos. I memorized names, titles, and connections, mapping out the power dynamics within VegaCorp. I learned which executives had skeletons in their closets and which departments were drowning in scandals waiting to surface. I became an expert in the art of leverage, knowing exactly where to push to make the system crack under its own weight. Step 2 was subtlety. Revenge isn't about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. It's about precision. A misplaced file here, a delayed project there, a quiet word in the ear of someone influential, planting seeds of doubt where they'd grow unchecked. Slowly but surely, I began dismantling the lives of those who had wronged me, piece by piece. Rachel from accounting, her meticulously organized spreadsheets suddenly developed errors that cost the company thousands. When questioned, she couldn't explain how they'd happened, and neither could anyone else. Within weeks, she was demoted, her reputation in tatters. Greg? I discovered he'd been padding his expense reports for months, pocketing the difference for himself. All it took was an anonymous tip to HR, and suddenly he was facing an investigation. By the time they finished digging, he'd resigned rather than risk termination. As for Chloe, I didn't target her directly. Instead, I made sure her internship ended abruptly, citing budget cuts that conveniently left her position unfilled. Watching her pack up her desk, tears streaming down her face, felt satisfying. Not because I hated her, but because she represented everything I despised about this place. The blind loyalty, the willingness to look the other way, the refusal to question authority. Of course, Marcus was the real prize. He thought he was untouchable, protected by his title and his charm. But even kings have weaknesses, and I intended to exploit every last one of his. Every move I made was deliberate, calculated to maximize impact while minimizing suspicion. I covered my tracks obsessively, erasing digital footprints and ensuring no evidence could trace anything back to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, using the very skills VegaCorp had taught me to dismantle it from within. And the best part? No one suspected a thing. Yet, because as satisfying as it was to watch them fall, one by one, I knew the game wasn't over. Not yet. There were still pieces to play, secrets to uncover, and scores to settle. Marcus was next on my list, but taking him down wouldn't be easy. He was smart, cunning, and ruthless, qualities I respected, even as I plotted his downfall. And so, as the weeks turned into months, I kept pushing forward, driven by a fire I hadn't known existed inside me. I stopped caring about blending in, about staying safe. Let them call me dramatic. Let them whisper behind my back. None of it mattered anymore. Because now, I wasn't just Lila Harper, the invisible cog in the machine. I was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Taking down Marcus required a level of patience and finesse I hadn't fully tapped into yet. He wasn't like the others, Greg with his petty greed or Rachel with her blind ambition. Marcus was a predator, someone who thrived in chaos and used fear as a weapon. You couldn't just trip him up. You had to outthink him, anticipate his moves before he made them. It was chess, not checkers, and I knew I only had one shot to get it right. The first step was understanding what truly mattered to him. Power, obviously that went without saying. But beneath the surface, there were cracks. Little things that hinted at vulnerabilities. For instance, Marcus hated being questioned. He loathed when people challenged his authority, even in the most indirect ways. And though he presented himself as untouchable, I noticed how he stiffened whenever someone brought up his past. Specifically, his time at another company before VegaCorp, a stint that ended abruptly under mysterious circumstances. I started digging. It wasn't easy. Marcus didn't leave trails like Greg or Rachel. His secrets weren't hiding in plain sight in expense reports or performance reviews. They were buried deep, locked away behind layers of legal jargon and confidentiality agreements. But if there's one thing I learned during my months of revenge plotting, it's that every secret has a key. You just have to know where to look. My search led me to an old employee database from his previous job, a marketing firm called Lumina Solutions. It took some creative hacking. Let's just say I owed IT guy Kevin a favor after helping him avoid a harassment complaint. But eventually I found what I was looking for, emails between Marcus and a former colleague named Elena Torres. The messages painted a damning picture. Back then, Marcus hadn't been the polished executive he pretended to be now. He'd been reckless, manipulative, and desperate to climb the ladder no matter the cost. According to Elena's correspondence, Marcus had sabotaged a major campaign she'd worked on, blaming its failure on her incompetence, so he could take credit for fixing it. When she confronted him, he retaliated by spreading rumors about her professionalism, effectively ending her career. Elena had tried to fight back, filing a formal complaint with HR. But instead of addressing the issue, the company swept it under the rug, forcing her out while keeping Marcus on board. Eventually, the scandal became too big to ignore, and Marcus left Lumina Solutions voluntarily. Or at least, that's the story he told everyone. The truth was far uglier. Armed with this information, I knew I had leverage. But leveraging it correctly would require precision. If I simply handed over the evidence to HR, Marcus might wiggle free again, using his charm and connections to deflect blame. No, this needed to be personal, public, something that would strip him of his power once and for all. I decided to leak the emails not all at once, but strategically, drip by drip. First, I sent an anonymous tip to a few influential employees, hinting at Marcus's shady history without giving away too much. Rumors began to circulate almost immediately. People started looking at him differently, questioning decisions they'd once accepted without hesitation. Then, I released snippets of the emails online, embedding them in forums frequented by industry insiders. Within days, the whispers turned into murmurs, and the murmurs grew louder. Marcus, of course, denied everything. He called the leaks baseless gossip, accusing disgruntled ex-employees of fabricating lies to tarnish his reputation. But denial only fueled the fire. The more he protested, the guiltier he seemed. Even his closest allies began distancing themselves, unwilling to risk association with a sinking ship. Still, Marcus refused to go quietly. In fact, he doubled down, launching a smear campaign of his own. He accused several high-profile employees of leaking confidential information, including me. Of course, he had no proof. It was all smoke and mirrors. But the accusations alone were enough to create tension in the office. Some people believed him, turning their backs on me once again. Others sided with me, seeing his attacks as further evidence of his desperation. For a while, it felt like the entire company was teeter. Small acts of sabotage continued, targeting anyone who dared support Marcus publicly. Files disappeared. Deadlines were missed. Promotions were delayed. Chaos reigned, and I reveled in it. This was what they deserved, for standing by while he slapped me, for calling me dramatic, for letting him rule over us like a tyrant. Let them feel the weight of their silence. But amidst the destruction, something unexpected happened. A few people reached out to me privately, confessing they'd always suspected Marcus was corrupt but never had the courage to speak up. One woman, a senior manager named Priya, admitted she'd witnessed similar behavior years ago but feared retaliation if she reported it. Another colleague, Daniel, revealed he'd been pressured into covering for Marcus during a botched project, sacrificing his own credibility to protect his boss. Their confession surprised me, not because they confirmed what I already knew, but because they reminded me I wasn't entirely alone. These conversations gave me pause. Up until now, my mission had been singular: destroy Marcus and everyone who enabled him. But hearing these stories made me realize the problem ran deeper than one bad boss. Vegacorp itself was rotten to the core, built on a foundation of exploitation and fear. Taking down Marcus wouldn't fix that. Not completely. And yet, as satisfying as it might have been to burn the whole place to the ground, I couldn't. Not yet. There were still good people here, people like Priya and Daniel who deserved better. Maybe, just maybe, dismantling Marcus's empire could pave the way for something new. Something better. With renewed determination, I focused on delivering the final blow. I arranged a meeting with HR, presenting them with the full collection of emails along with timestamps, metadata, and corroborating statements from Elena herself, whom I'd tracked down through social media. She agreed to testify, eager to finally expose the man who had ruined her life. Together, we built a case so airtight even Marcus's charm couldn't penetrate it. When the verdict came, it was swift and merciless. Marcus was fired on the spot, banned from ever setting foot in the building again. News of his downfall spread quickly, igniting celebrations among those who had suffered under his reign. For the first time in years, the atmosphere at Vega Corp felt lighter, freer. People laughed openly in the hallways. Projects moved forward without unnecessary roadblocks. Even the coffee tasted sweeter. But for me, the victory felt bittersweet. Yes, I had taken down the monster who had haunted my days and nights. Yes, I had reclaimed a measure of control over my life. Yet part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. Had my quest for justice turned me into something I barely recognized? Was I any better than Marcus, wielding fear and manipulation as tools of vengeance? I didn't have answers to those questions. All I knew was that I couldn't stay at Vega Corp. Not after everything that had happened. So I packed up my desk, said my goodbyes to the few colleagues I trusted, and walked out the door for the last time. As I walked away from Vega Corp, the weight of everything I'd been carrying, the fear, the anger, the need for revenge, began to lift. Marcus was gone, his empire dismantled, and though the scars remained, I finally felt free. The old Lila Harper had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by someone unrecognizable, yet undeniably stronger. Standing on that sidewalk, I realized my story wasn't about destruction, it was about transformation. What came next didn't matter as much as what I'd become, a woman who refused to be silenced or dismissed ever again. And with that thought, I stepped into the sunlight, ready to write a new chapter.